we all have a unique experience based on the way that we grew up, based on the way we learned how we fit in the world, how we earn love, attention, and affection. But it's like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, like we're all looking for the same thing. We just want to belong and we just want to feel like we're living with a purpose.
Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast where I interview space holders from all over the world. I'm your host, my name is Karolina, and I am the Connection Catalyst. I help spiritual entrepreneurs experience deeper connection with themselves, with others, and with the universe. Today on the show, we have Devon Caley, the therapist and the founder of the Alchemy of Authenticity. Welcome to the show, Devon. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm so good. Thank you so much for reaching out and having me.
I am super excited to talk to you, especially that we want to touch upon the topics that are a little bit of a taboo, I think. And so I would love to start with your story. How did you become a therapist? What has brought you to this mission, I guess, or to your path that you'd like to help people and you'd like to help them reprogram their subconscious mind and generally change their lives? I guess there is a nice story behind that. So I would love if you can share with us.
So it's actually funny because I don't want to say like I became a therapist by accident, but I almost feel like I got here by accident. Or something that I've considered myself for my entire life is somebody that's a storyteller. Like from the second that I could hold a pencil, I was writing short stories and writing stories and, escalating into writing novels. And, eventually, I got into blogging and, my strength, I think all through grade school, high school was always English and writing. And I just genuinely loved telling the human story. And when I got to college, I initially actually went in and was studying film. And I did a year as a film major where my dream was to be a screenwriter. My dream was to be, a best-selling writer. And my minor was psychology. But I kind of had a moment where I started wondering, like, what I guess is like the stable or secure future of me pursuing being a screenwriter. Like even I went to school just outside Washington D.C. and even there the film industry was just so saturated that I started to doubt myself. And so I switched my major and minor where I went into psychology. And I realized like this is just a different way of sharing the human experience and telling the human story. It gets me really so much deeper into the human experience and understanding, how do people think and how do they do what they do? And I found out it's something I think I'm good at. And so I just kind of kept pursuing it. And, next thing you know, now I'm getting my doctorate. So yeah, still studying clinical psychology. I've been a therapist for 4 years now. But yeah, just I think been sharing and exploring the human experience, way, way, way before this even started.
Amazing. That's awesome. So, over the last 4 years, when you have been a therapist, do you see some kind of like patterns in people? Do you see like it's kind of like almost copy paste that people have problems, but then you actually have tools to resolve them because it's almost the same, like based on their personality, based on how they were programmed in their subconscious mind, childhood trauma, and all these things. Do you feel like it's quite, let's say, maybe not easy, but like simple to move through people's issues in a way?
I want to say yes and no. Because, like you're saying, we all have a unique experience based on the way that we grew up, based on the way we learned how we fit in the world, how we earn love, attention, and affection. But it's like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, like we're all looking for the same thing. We just want to belong and we just want to feel like we're living with a purpose. And like with that, it's like, everybody has experienced insecurity, everybody's experienced grief and loss and heartbreak and feeling inadequate. And we imagine that we're the only people that have experienced this in our lifetime. We feel this deep shame, feeling like something is wrong with us, which is where we come back to authenticity, where we aren't having these conversations. And so because we're not having these conversations, we imagine that we're alone, that we're the only ones that are going through this or experiencing it. And that is so far from the truth. And so even last night I went out to dinner with a friend and she was talking about having intrusive thoughts and she felt like something was wrong with her. And we kind of broke it down, and it was super fun dinner conversation, but we kind of like broke these thoughts down, and she was like, I feel so much more normal. And it's like, you were never abnormal to begin with. Like we just don't talk about these things in a way that everybody else kind of realizes. Everybody is sort of experiencing a lot of these things just in different ways.
Yes, I agree with that so much. There is no person walking on this earth that doesn't have any kind of trauma in their childhood. So even just the birth
Yes.
is already freaking traumatic. So I feel like if
Mhm.
if we are hidden with all these emotions, then this is what's making the problem. But if it was okay for us to feel any way we feel at any point, even in the supermarket or even outside around people, then I feel like the world would be much more healed and would be a better place for us all as well. Because as you said, like people feel so weird when they feel negative stuff, and it's not weird at all. Like everyone feels this way. So if, as you said, if we can just be together and just express all these, depths of our subconscious mind to each other, then it's the most healing thing ever. I feel like even just the presence of someone there, if you are going through a lot of traumatic emotions or anything like that, just the very presence of someone just holding space for you and being there for you is what is healing for someone sometimes. Just being with someone.
Mhm.
Do you agree with that? Would you say that this is one of the most healing things ever?
100%. And, even like early career as a therapist, sometimes it's hard because you have clients who come in and, you're like, I don't necessarily know if we're making progress or sort of getting like, deep into things. But, you have to remember where it's like, yeah, people have been essentially trained their whole life that what they think, their opinions, their needs are not important. And so even if you're talking about, yeah, that person's experience at the grocery store that day, or, what the person said at the bank, or, just like little things as they go about their day, it's like, but you're teaching them that what they perceive in their day to day is important. And like that is, we can't start the therapeutic process until they feel like their experience is genuinely valued and important to the person, that's like to anybody else in the world. And so it's like as you're sort of learning that in the therapeutic relationship, it's like you're going to start to apply that to all of your other relationships too. And so it's like, it's hard to where it's like, yeah, you don't go from like my perspective of like, are you making progress? Like, are you gaining something? It's like, where are you at in that process? Because I don't, yeah, know your experiences. Like I'm still getting to know a client. So it's, yeah, first we have to learn, like we are hurt through other people growing up, and therefore we can only heal certain aspects of ourselves through other people. And having someone that can pay genuine and authentic attention to the things that you're saying and provide that care and hold that space, like that can be transformative for some people.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I totally agree and resonate with everything that you're saying. And that brings me to one curious question, because you were saying how, you need to develop a relationship and meet this person and get to know them and so on. And, I'm doing kind of like psychotherapeutic processes, although I'm not a psychotherapist. I just did some courses with specific methods. And one of them is a method that focuses on the feeling that you are feeling right now. And because you feel
Mhm.
this feeling so deeply, you're coming back to childhood trauma, the very first time that you've experienced this
Yes.
feeling, and then you resolve it there in terms of you express all these emotions that you were suppressing back then. And then you have other parts of this process like inner child work, reparenting your inner child, coming as an adult to the memory and giving this child what it needed, and then taking this child out of the memory into the safe space that you create mentally in your mind, and so on. And there are some other steps to this process. But my question is, because I've been looking for someone, for example, in my town in Szczecin in Poland, I was looking for someone similar who does similar things to me. And I was calling all these psychotherapists, psychologists. I was like, okay, this is what I do. And I'm looking for someone to do exactly what I do, because if I want to help some of my family members, they're not going to listen to me, but I want them to experience what I'm talking about, and you know
Mhm.
how it is with family members. Sometimes you just cannot
Yeah.
break the wall there, right? I'm not an
Yeah.
authority figure for some people in my family, and that's okay. And so, but I would like to them to experience how it feels to heal this shit, because actually when you heal and when you strip all these layers of subconscious traumas and everything, your life becomes so much more powerful and just so much better. So I just wanted to find someone, and I called so many people, and most of them were like, okay, yeah, we need to do like a therapy for like half a year, or we have like a 1 year program, or we have this and that, or we just do talk therapy and whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, I get it. For people who feel quite unsafe in life, they maybe need this trust built over some time and build this relationship with the therapist. But for people like me who are just like, okay, I'm just up for the ride, just take me to my trauma and let's resolve it ASAP. Like
Let's
first
go
of
in.
all, yeah, exactly. First of all, like which kind of methods of psychotherapy, for example, I should look for if I want to just go straight to the very very core problem. Because I think that, okay, talk therapy about the things that are happening now is nice, because maybe if you're not heard, then you're meeting the need for being heard, or maybe if you don't trust, then you're building the trust. But honestly, in my view, and it's only my view on based on my experience, if you do not go to your childhood trauma and don't resolve it there, you kind of like only digging into the surface levels of your mind. And if you really want to
Mhm.
go deep, you need to go to this traumatic events that have started this emotional response in you. That's
Yeah.
my perspective on it, and that's what I found with my clients anyway. But it might not be, the ultimate truth. But I'm curious about your perspective on it, and how you feel about this, like, long-term therapy and the trust building versus going straight into the core problem and resolving it there. Because to me, this, resolving it straight away is just seems more effective and quicker. And I understand that not everyone needs a quicker way. Maybe some people need to take it slower and build the trust. But how do you feel about this, kind of like this discrepancy?
Yeah, I'm like big throat clear. Okay, so I think there's a lot of different theories that I heard going on there, and kind of like what you're describing is like one of, I think, the biggest criticisms of psychotherapy is like a lot of the main theories are what we call manualized, meaning there's like a specific way that you're supposed to be moving through each of them. Like there's a general sort of timeline of when you're supposed to start to see progress in these things. But right now, the PsyD program that I'm in is focused on the humanistic perspective. And it's, again, like one of the biggest critics of that manualized process, because like, how do I meet you specifically where you are at in your experience and go from there? And so if you've already done a lot of the healing work, if you already have a lot of experience, like, yeah, you're ready to just like head first, go in and like do all of these things. And for some people, it's like like the average person can identify three emotions in their experience. Like, as I'm sure you're familiar, if you've seen, the emotion wheel, it's like there are hundreds to thousands different shades of emotion that we can experience, and the average person can identify three.
Are you
And
serious?
again,
No,
yes,
come on.
yes, yes, heard it on the Brene Brown podcast. I think it was Dr. Vivek Murphy that was doing that research. But yeah, that blew my mind when I heard that. But also kind of emphasized like, so two of the main theories that I use are emotion focused therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, which is mindfulness based. And I think that you were describing being in that present moment. So a couple more things that I kind of heard in there too, just to give some more theory and credibility to the work that you're doing, is, before we even have language, like the only way that we have to perceive the world is our emotional experience. So the first way that we understand how we fit into the world and how the world works is through our emotions. And then we develop language. So like we have our core needs, and our needs fuel our emotions fuel our thoughts, and then our thoughts fuel our behavior. And so if we're just skipping between need and thought, or we don't even know our emotions or our needs, like we're just starting with thought, like there is so much of our identity and experience that we're just missing and neglecting by not diving deeper into that part of ourselves. And so, being able to understand our emotional experience, on top of that, our attachment style, if you're familiar with attachment theory, is formed by the time we're 3 years old. We don't start forming conscious memories till the time that we're 5. And so, again, through our emotional experience, we have already figured out how we earn love and attention, how people respond to us before we can even form conscious memories. Like we have this innate sense of identity and the way that we fit into the world before we can even really perceive what's going on around us in like a higher functioning type of way. And then on top of that, a lot of people usually say like, when I was a kid, I just, I was so much fun, and I was like, I was always going on adventures, and I was just like this daredevil, and I did all of these things, and I was always so happy. And they're like, just something happened. And what happens is you turn 7, and 7 is when ego starts to develop. And that's when we sort of start to develop, like if you think of like a Venn diagram, it's like, we start off kind of congruent, where it's like our authentic self is sort of just our identity. But we start to move into this way where it's like now our thoughts, now our behaviors start to dictate, like, comparing ourselves to other people, or this person has what I don't, or like, if my parents are responding, my primary caregiver is responding this way, like I need to be something else. And we almost start developing what we call this false self. And so we say literally everything goes back to childhood. 100% everything goes back to childhood. And like 7 is when we start, cutting off pieces of ourselves, rejecting pieces of ourselves, pushing pieces of ourselves down, and just moving further away from who we are authentically meant to be. And so it's like who we are in childhood genuinely is this authentic version of ourselves. And we just start constructing this person that we feel like we have to be for most of our lives. And our brain can do such a good job of making you believe that your false self is who you are. When it's like, I don't know if, you've seen all those memes where it's like, oh, when you find out that like, it was something that was a trauma response, it wasn't actually your personality. But it's like, it's true. It's, we feel this pressure to become somebody completely different than who we are, because that's what we've learned gets us what we want. And we can go our entire lives just feeling like something is missing and not knowing what that is, because ego does such a good job of making us believe that that is authentically who we are when it's not. And we can do this thing, I'm sure there's a word for it, but I call it like faux vulnerability, where it's like when we can speak about vulnerable experiences in a very logic brained way. It's like we're like, yeah, I am so open. Like I'm just like super connected to my emotional experience. Like I'm this very genuine, authentic human being. But you're speaking about everything in such a logical, disconnected way that it's like that's still the false self. Like that's still not you. And so it's really hard to differentiate which one is showing up and when. And like our like time is a human construct. So it's like, we our brain doesn't know what is past, what is like, future, like what is in the present. And so a lot of times we can get, pulled into worrying about the future, and we can get like pulled into like, seeing things from the past and giving these, negative or like false appraisals to the thing in front of us because like we think that it's genuine. But like you're saying, we can bring ourselves into the present moment where we actually have a sense of control and we can identify what it is that we're feeling in that moment. Therefore, like what is it that we specifically need? Like there's pretty much no stopping us, which sounds a little dramatic, but like, I think when you can identify your emotional experience, when you can pull yourself into the present and like put those blinders on from like, what is to be and what has been, like you have so much power and control that we just miss so many opportunities of if we're, blinded by things from the past. So it all goes back to
Mm.
childhood. It's such a cliche. I feel like I have clients joke about that where they're like, again, like my childhood again. And it's like, well, yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
we always
everything
end up
is
back
formed.
there. So
Yeah, everything is formed there. I love your passion when you talk about all this stuff, and I share the same passion. So I'm with you, on that. And based on what you said, I also feel like my understanding is that based on one of the typologies of personalities, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Enneagram typology,
yes.
and I love
Hmm.
Enneagram. It's like my favorite,
Me
absolute
too.
favorite thing to do and to explore and to, ask all the people around me what is their type and whatever. Because in these, like, you have 9 personalities, right? And 3 of them are
Hmm.
more kind of like emotional, and then 3 of them are more intellectual, and 3 of them are more action based. So based on
Hmm.
that, you see, like, okay, 6 out of 9 of them are not that emotional. I mean, okay, the ones that are closer with the wing to the ones that are emotional, which means they have traits
Hmm.
of the personality, neighboring personality, maybe might be a little bit more emotional, but most of the population would be not emotional that much, right? More action
Hmm.
based, more intellectual based. So therefore, I feel like emotional awareness is one of the missing pieces in our society. If we could have more emotional awareness and really, as you say, be present in the moment and act out of what the present moment awareness and our authentic self wants to say, rather than going with the subconscious program, just coding from the computer that was placed there when we were like 5, 7, 2 years old or whatever, then we would live a more truthful and authentic life. But that just brings me to the topic of authenticity, because I feel like you're obviously an expert because you are alchemist of authenticity, right? So I would love to talk about that a little bit, because for me there is a different definition for authenticity that someone might have, and I feel like I would love to touch upon it with you, because one of them is like authenticity based on like expressing how you feel in the moment and like authentically, honestly saying how you feel. So that's like one part of the authenticity,
Hmm.
which then is kind of like, okay, you know how you feel in this moment right now, and you know how generally you might feel, but then you have so much suppressed shit within you, so many suppressed parts of you, that actually, if you really wanted to be authentic, you would have to express all of them, right? But they are unconscious.
Hmm.
They are like, you're not even conscious of them. So you cannot really be fully authentic 100% unless you know all parts of you that are subconscious too, because this is still a part of you and it's still authentic to you to act in a specific way, but you just do it subconsciously and not consciously. So that's like one way of looking at it, and I'm curious how you see
Hmm.
authenticity based on that. And then another way is the authenticity based on more like the essence and like the higher self, in a way, the soul, someone could say.
Hmm.
Because like, if I would say that, if I had experiences like of fully being just in my soul and just feeling my soul in my body and just walking on this earth, for example, when I was fasting for an extended period of time, I once did the twice did the fast of 3 weeks. And so during fasting process, I was really just feeling like I'm a soul walking in a human body. I'm not really a mind, I'm not thinking anything, I'm just experiencing life and just being this pure essence. And so that felt authentic to me too. So that's like a different level of authenticity, like authenticity in terms of everyone authentically is love, is joy, is light, right? And then
Hmm.
the programs, the traumas that are programming us are kind of like, let's say, quote unquote inauthentic. So
Mhm.
how do you see authenticity based on these two, let's say, definitions or perspectives on authenticity? Because I'm really curious about, yeah, what you have to say, and about these two as well.
I think I agree with everything that you're saying. And it's like, what is the degree to which we can come home to ourselves and sort of be at least who we believe that we are in that moment? Where it's like, if you're being who you believe yourself to be, it's like that's not necessarily inauthentic. It's not the most authentic you can be. But I think we all have moments where it's like, insecurity is going to get the best of us. Or if we have a powerful emotion like, sadness or anger or fear, it's like, we're not always going to behave in an authentic way. But it's like, do we have the awareness afterwards to take accountability for how we showed up? Are we willing to do that inner work after? Are we willing to own up for the fact that I wasn't behaving as my authentic self in that moment? Where if you are imperfect in your authenticity, that doesn't make you less authentic. And sometimes like something I've probably thought or said 5 years ago, it's like I don't believe that necessarily anymore, but it doesn't mean that I wasn't authentic in that moment. It's like I genuinely thought that to be true about myself then, but as I've unpacked things and done the work, like I've realized that like, yeah, maybe that's not so true anymore, but it's like, yeah, it doesn't make it less authentic then if I genuinely believe that that was true and who I was. And so I think it's partly just giving ourselves compassion for the way that we're showing up in the moment, which like, explains but doesn't excuse, where it's like, taking accountability for the times that we make mistakes or behave out of alignment with our authenticity. But it's just really about like, can you be true? Like you said, I love that word essence, like to the essence and the core of who you are as a human being, more than anything else.
Mm. Yeah, so that's kind of like, that's why this authenticity as a definition is so hard to use even as a word or whatever, because on one hand you have authenticity as your essence, and on one hand you have authenticity as how you feel in the moment, which is based on trauma, which is based on programs, which is not the essence,
Mhm.
right? So it's kind of like both playing out, I think, simultaneously, because you can be, let's say, in an emotional trauma response and then authentically express how you feel, but then come back to your essence and be like, okay, this is my program and not who I really was. But at that time, it was really honest for me to say that this is how I feel. And yeah, another thing
Mhm.
is like, authenticity, it's like you have so many different parts of you. Like, for example, one part of me really likes going through my emotional release, because then I know that I will feel better, and I'm super happy to do it because I know that I'm going to improve my life and I'm going to feel so much lighter and whatever. But then another part of me is like, fuck this negative shit. I don't even want to cry. I don't want to shout. I don't want to, be vulnerable. I don't want to go through all these things. I shaking my body or crying or punching the pillows or whatever. And it's unpleasant. Like, I don't want it. It creates discomfort. So if I say I'm happy to do this, it's true. But also, if I say I'm very not happy to do this, it's also true. So I feel like it's such a hard thing to, to express authenticity, because then, like, usually both are true. And usually, if we identify as one, let's say a confident person, then there is a part of us that is not confident as well, simultaneously. And maybe we just haven't discovered it, because, as you said, we are creating these identities as a part of our experience when we have a trauma, and we know that being confident will get us more love and approval. Then we become confident and we suppress the part of us that is not confident. And then, but then both of them are true. So actually, saying anything about yourself that I'm only this or I'm only that is quite inauthentic, because then you have this other part of you inside anyway. So like, it's quite a, yeah, I think it's a very interesting and also challenging topic to talk about, because everyone has their own definition of what it means. But I feel like maybe if you talk about honesty, that's like a, let's say, similar word, but it would be easier maybe to say, because honestly, if I honestly I feel right now like this, or honestly, you know like, if you just honestly express yourself, and then you can like really hold your boundaries and really create the most beautiful relationships, I think, because this is so crucial to just like really express who you are and not hide anything. Because actually, like, yeah, if you're not authentic in your life, if you're not honest with yourself and with others, you pretty much are creating what you don't want. Like, if you're putting up with something that you don't really vibe with, and you're just like not saying it because you don't want to hurt someone, or you don't want to create some drama or whatever, then you're actually making yourself in bad position. And it's not very good for you at all, because like, you're gonna just attract people that and situations and conditions that you agree to. But if you're like, okay, I
Yeah.
have a boundary, this is not what I'm going to put up with, and I honestly think that this is not for me, this relationship is not for me, this is not how I want to be treated, then you actually can be empowered and create the life you desire the most. So I think authenticity is such a
Yeah.
big and important topic. So what do you feel like people should do who feel like they struggle with being authentic and expressing exactly how they feel in the moment?
Well, because I think a couple of things is like, you just have to practice. And I don't know too if like you've come across like the term like, shadow or like doing shadow work and everything too, where it's like, how do we acknowledge like the deeper, darker parts of ourselves? Like for example, it's like, when you think of like the stress responses where there's fight, flight, freeze, but then there's also the fourth one, fawn, where it's like, sort of people pleasing, like getting people on your team, like have like building that support system just in case something were to go wrong. But it's like at its core, if we look at it in like a shadow sense, it's like people pleasing is actually manipulation. Like where it's like, getting people to believe that you are a certain thing, or sort of like, getting people to like you to ease some of your own discomfort. And it's like, how do we sort of come to terms with some of these things? And it's like, again, I think like a big piece of it comes back down to compassion. And it's like, how do we have compassion for ourselves for the way that we're showing up, or even going back to inner child, where it's like when that shadow self is showing up, it's like, that is a part of you that deserves love just as much as like, who you are at your essence, who you are at your core, who you are authentically, like that true genuine congruent self. It's like that false self deserves just as much love and compassion. And like it's almost like one of those paradoxical things where it's like, even though you hate that version of yourself, even though you don't like that version of yourself, even though you recognize that that version of you is not necessarily authentic, it's like if we don't love it, it's never going to go away. And it's like, sometimes it's just starting with tolerating those parts of ourselves. But again, not acknowledging that they're there, not acknowledging our own flaws and faults is just as inauthentic as, anything else. And I think I was just having a conversation with one of my colleagues the other day where we were talking about sometimes even in the spiritual community, it feels like there's sometimes this, I don't want to call it toxicity, but almost toxicity where people are like, but I'm doing the work. So like, I am authentic, or, I do know what's going on, or I do know all of these things best. And it's like, that's almost a red flag where it's like, but like coming into like that spiritual place and acknowledging your true self and essence is knowing like we don't know it all. And like we are still learning, and we're always on this journey, and we're always growing and changing, and we're always moving closer to our higher purpose. And so I feel like sometimes people can almost like hide behind this sort of I think when we talk about attachment styles too, where it's like, attachment styles like apply to romantic relationships, they also apply to friendships and our jobs. But the thing that we forget the most is attachment styles also apply to ideologies and belief systems. And so sometimes people can almost like attach this sort of like meaning where it's like, I want to believe in this thing that tells me that I am loving and tells me that I'm good, because then I don't have to change. If I'm good, if I'm like, working on things, where it's like, then I am inherently good. And it's like, the thing is like, yes, I do believe genuinely all people are inherently good, and we sort of do things that maybe are out of alignment with our values to earn that love, attention, affection, whatever the false self is kind of guiding us towards. But all of us are imperfect. All of us are human. All of us are going to make mistakes. And this goes back to like, yeah, we're not having those conversations about the times that we fail, about the times that we're, sad, that we're experiencing grief, that we're imperfect, that we let anger get the better of us, that, you're like, yeah, it's like, you knew the best thing for you was to do these emotional releases, but you're like, today I just really don't want to. And it's like, we always feel like if we're not showing up perfectly 100% of the time, then we are failing or doing something wrong. And that is 100% not true. And I personally have so much more respect for somebody who I think can acknowledge their flaws and faults, and when they're showing up imperfectly and doing all of these things. And like it's really hard. And so again, I think a core piece of that is like when we can educate ourselves on our emotional experience. Like when we start to realize, again, when you're going back to like starting the therapeutic process and realizing that what you think and feel is genuinely important. It's like we have to feel that sense of security again. Like we are hurt through other people growing up, and so sometimes we can only heal through other people. And so we can like build that foundation, but that's when like going into isolation and doing these things independently, and like being able to give yourself those gifts through reparenting and all these other strategies, like it's really this process that you have to move through. And like, I mean, there's a lot of different levels to it, but it's just really, really not giving up, trusting the process, knowing that you're going to make mistakes. Because I feel like people try and then it gets hard, or, they fall off the wagon, or they don't know how to do something, and they're so scared to ask for help or to make a mistake or do something wrong that they just abandon the process, versus being like, no, this is just a normal part of it. Like I have been Like, I even tell my clients where I'm like, I'll like say things and they're like, God, I wish I could have like written that down because like I wish I could just like verbatim like say that to someone else. I'm like, oh no, 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 like trust me, like when I'm angry and in the moment, like I don't always handle things perfectly. I don't always say the best thing. Like a formerly severe anxious attachment. And so it's like when my, anxious attachment, like I did not always behave in alignment with my values, but like objectively from the outside, it's so much easier for me to say these things. But like this is your process. And like, you can't compare, like, if another person exists, our brain is automatically going to compare us to them. But like, you cannot compare me and my experience and me objectively sitting outside of this and my different experiences to you and what you're going through in your moment. And like, again, it's like if we sort of compare ourselves, like we're abandoning our authenticity in the way. So I don't know if you can hear my cat playing with something with a bell in it over there. But like, it's difficult. Because I wish I could say I feel like there's one right way to do it. But something I also, recommend to a lot of my clients is like just do things, like follow joy, follow the things that sort of light you up and make you feel happy. I think that there's a lot of journaling prompts, but it's like, starting these journaling prompts, but leaving space or leaving a whole page, because it's like as you get to know you, like you can go back and refine some of these answers as far as like who you are and what you're interested in and, what you like and what do you believe. And like it's, again, there's no perfect way to do it, but I'd say, follow joy and the things that make you genuinely happy, educate yourself on your emotional experience and what message each of those emotions is trying to give you. And then it's like, yeah, just sort of journal, right? Like find, like go on Pinterest, on TikTok, there's a million journal prompts that come up if you're sort of looking under the right hashtags or in sort of like the right circles, I think. But it really takes time. Like think of like, your best friend, where it's like, it's going to take you months, it's going to take you years to feel like you deeply know and trust this person, and like give yourself that same courtesy and time.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that. I'm just so excited because I have many questions, but I need to pick only a few. So one of the things that you said, because we have, okay, attachment styles, just briefly for people who maybe don't know it and they listen to it, there are
Mm-hmm.
four from what I know: anxious, avoidant,
Mm-hmm.
disorganized, and secure. And anxious
Mm-hmm.
is kind of like I had anxious attachment style. I mean, now probably not as much, but still my background is anxious attachment style. So it's kind of like a codependency thingy where you feel just not good when you are just maybe scared, or just scared of separation, or maybe you have abandonment wound or things like that. That's how it came for me. Avoidant is when you feel unsafe being with someone, right? When you are unsafe
Mm-hmm.
feeling connected. Disorganized is when you have them both at the same time. And then secure is when it's all kind of like balanced. So first, my first question is it even possible to have a secure attachment style?
Yes, 100% it is. And again, it's like, some people I think are just, I don't want to say lucky, but it's like, if you have parents that have done the work or parents that are emotionally secure, it's like, you're going to grow up that way too. And secure doesn't mean that you had caregivers that showed up perfectly. It just means that they were able to sort of hold space for your emotions. Where I think, I don't know if you watched Atlas of the Heart on HBO Max, the Brene Brown special, but like she even asks, she's like, how many of you in the audience like grew up in, a household where emotions were prioritized? And I think there's maybe like 100 people in the audience and 3 raised their hands. And it's like, it's the strong minority, I would say. But again, like you're saying too, I think I say formerly anxiously attached. I don't want to say again I'm like 100% into secure at this point, because I think that there's always, triggers and things that are going to come up. But it's like if you're willing to do the work and address these parts of yourself, you can definitely become secure. You are not locked in to whatever your attachment style starts as. And it's like typically too, it's like, when you start as anxiously attached, where it's like, think anxious leans in, avoidant leans out. And so when anxious is leaning in, it's like, people who are of opposite emotional or opposite attachment styles tend to attract. And so the funny thing
Oh
is, it's like,
yes. Oh
people
shit.
who are
That
anxious,
triggers
yeah,
the fuck out of me. Like I always
yes,
attract anxious attachment style, and it's so triggering. It's the worst thing ever, but also the most healing.
it is. It is, but the thing too is like it's so funny because people who are anxiously attached are always like, but I know my emotional experience. I'm so into my emotional experience. Like, why can't my partner meet me there? But as you start to heal anxious attachment, you realize like I chose avoidant partners because I'm also emotionally unavailable. But I didn't have to like sort of acknowledge my own emotional unavailability because my partner was even more emotionally unavailable. And so it's funny because like even like in my own healing process, I realized that where I was like, yeah, I'm so emotionally aware and I'm so good in a relationship and I know how to communicate and blah, 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 blah. And then I got to this point where I was like, oh, actually I'm emotionally unavailable. And I was like, crap, like was like, like three owls in a trench coat this whole time. And you finally like realize it. It's like, then you have to again build your emotional awareness and experience so that like you can really like when you know who you are authentically at your core, it's like dating is so different. Like especially since I feel like I've come to this more secure place where it's like I don't feel that spark anymore, because a lot of times that spark is really just that like attachment style being activated, or it's like the people that I think I found the most success like in relationships with. When I first met them, I felt nothing. Like I was like, I enjoy your company, I think you're a super great person, I feel like we communicate super well, and that spark just isn't there to the point where you're like, am I actually into you, or like I genuinely don't know, because you're so used to feeling like that high or that low. Again, your subconscious, your unconscious picks up on someone's attachment style way before we consciously do, where it's like always when we go back, you can see all those red flags, everything from the beginning, and you're like, yep, it was literally there the whole time, I just didn't see it. But it's like now it's just like it's so calm, and it's like I don't go into it like expecting people to super like me or whatever, where it's like I know what I bring to the table as a partner, like I know who I am as a person, and like either you're gonna see that or you're not. And it's like if you don't see that, like it might suck, it might hurt, but it's like that's just the way it works. It doesn't say anything about me or who I am as a person. I'm not going to change anything about me because one person I went on a date with didn't see me or like something or whatever. And like it's just so much more empowering when you have this awareness for the way that you're showing up, and yes, or like these lies that your brain is telling you about attachment, what to believe, and dating and whatever else. And it's really freeing, I think, to do that work and move into a more secure.
Thank you for sharing that. It's amazing. And so another question that really I would really love to know, because you said, okay, if for example, if I have an anxious attachment style, would I also have an anxious attachment style to my beliefs and to my thoughts and to my emotions, as you mentioned? Because it's not only how we relate to other people, it's also how we relate to our beliefs and emotion. And so, is my attachment style gonna kind of like spill over all the other things, or is it possible to have other attachment style too? For example, your thoughts and beliefs, or is it always like the same? And then if it's the same one or even different, how does it even play out? Like, what if I have anxious attachment style, for example, to my thoughts and emotions, how does it play out in my consciousness?
So there's a lot of different ways I think that you would see it playing out. And so some of the examples I'm thinking of is like somebody who's anxiously attached. It's like they might lean more heavily on support systems. And so again, like on the surface, it's like, no, you have more connections if you have a better support system, but it might come to the point that like you're abandoning your own judgment to sort of default into like some sort of support system. Or I don't want to say everybody that seeks help, like, has anxious attachment, because obviously it goes both ways. But like I'm sure like you've experienced like clients or people where they're like, but like I need you to tell me what you think, or they're googling every answer to something and they're looking everything up on the internet, and they're like, well, I don't know what I think, but if I Google this, like the internet will tell me what I should think or what I should feel or what I should, or if I read this book or if I like do this thing, like then I'll know what to do. But like we're abandoning our own judgment and intuition, and usually there's like a certain answer that we're looking to confirm, almost again, which is still abandoning ourselves and our own judgment and our own emotional experience. And people who are anxiously attached are more likely to be in jobs that demand too much of them, where it's like a job where you feel like you have to prove yourself, like a job where just you as you are is not enough, that you have to be overachieving and super productive, and you might be like the most liked person in the office, but again, like it could be that fawn response, it could be that people pleasing, where it's like I need everybody here to like me so that I don't get fired, or I need everybody here to like me so that there's a certain outcome or certain opportunity or something can happen. And it's again in that moment you're abandoning who you authentically are in order to get something that you want or you need. And again, these things might not always be so obvious, but I guess those are just like some of the first examples that pop in my head of like, yeah, ways that you would abandon who you are, what you think, what you believe, like in preference for something outside of yourself instead.
And what about avoidant attachment style in this case, when it comes to like beliefs and emotions?
hmm So they're probably going to be somebody where it's like they're going to be much less likely to seek help just in general. They're going to be less likely to probably be in therapy. They're probably not going to be reading the books. They're not going to be listening to the podcasts. They're probably going to be somebody who's in a job that just like they can completely disconnect. Or it's like something all consuming to the point where it's like they don't have to feel, they don't have to think. It's like they can sort of just presently be with this thing. There might be like, the overworker, like the person who, works like the insanely long hours, like the super intense job, the job that is more logic brained or numbers focused, like something where like they don't necessarily have to tap into their emotional side. They might also struggle with creativity a little bit. But yeah, again, it's like those are just the first examples that pop in my head, but I'm sure there's a lot more ways. And it's like to even getting into like it's interesting where like certain like I don't know, like certain programs. But it's like, it's funny where like I even see just kind of anecdotally in my clients, like there are certain people who have avoidant attachment where like they're drawn to very specific individuals, like, celebrities, podcasts, like people who speak, where it's just funny. You see all these like little things that seem to align, where it's like, what is the message that you're getting here? And like, what are you getting out of these resources that, yeah, sort of again tell you like, you're fine. You don't need to change. Like everything as you are is okay. It's like, other people's faults, or, like, yeah, like listen to me. I have the answers. Like I can do this for you. And like, it's really interesting, even anecdotally, to see the way that people are drawn, I think, to certain resources just based on their attachment style alone.
That's so interesting. And what do you think about this disorganized attachment style? Then how do, because this is like the most interesting one because you have both at once. So how does that play out?
Mhm. I feel like that's much more dependent on the situation and relationship. And so again, it's almost that paradoxical, counterintuitive thing where it's like the closer someone gets to our inner circle, the more that they're going to tap into that attachment style and attachment wound for us. And so it's the people that we're closest to that often see the worst in us, which is like, because we know that they love us, but also like we're so much more emotionally dependent on them that there is a higher risk, at stake with this individual. And so I think it sort of depends on the situation, typically on the person, what the relationship is, what the dynamic is. But, yeah, it can go sort of either way. And I think, again, kind of coming from that, perspective where it's like, it really depends more on their experiences and their specific wounds and trauma to know like which one's going to sort of appear and when. But yeah, so it's like, it depends is the
Mm-hmm.
short version of that answer.
Mm-hmm. And so for disorganized attachment style, it's kind of like a specific situation might trigger it either avoidant or anxious, depending on how we were programmed, probably with the trauma before, right? Depending on like how the energy is and how it's gonna trigger you and so on. Is that correct?
Hmm. Yeah, where it's either like that leaning in where it's like, please, it's like, I think like the two phrases I kind of break it down is like, anxious is like, please don't leave me. And avoidant is like, I just want to be able to get it right. And so it's like kind of those things where it's like, please don't leave me. But then it's like, but wait, like if I feel like I'm failing at the relationship or whatever, it's like, actually get away from me. Like, cause like when I'm with you, I feel like I'm failing, or I feel like I'm doing something wrong. And like, I don't like that. And so it's like, that push pull, like even just at the individual level, which can be really confusing, for a partner too. Cause they're like, I don't understand what's going on, or I thought that things were okay, or I thought you wanted me to not leave, but now that I'm here, you want me to, like, it can be really confusing. But again, it just really depends on specifically what that trigger is in the moment based on that person's unique wounds.
Perfect. And so how do you develop a secure attachment style then? What do you do?
A lot of work. um, but I think, part of it is, that is like, the only way, I think, is just really educating yourself through resources like, reading books or attending workshops. Because I think it's one of those things where, especially if you've had it your entire life, like ego does such a good job of convincing you that this is genuinely who you are, that we can't usually see it for ourselves, that it takes an outside perspective kind of holding us accountable kind of moment to moment, where like in therapy, it's like if a client is telling me an experience and they're kind of like, I don't understand why this happened, and I'll be like, okay, but let's approach this through an attachment lens, and like, now tell me, why do you think like maybe this happened? And they're like, oh, like now I can kind of see with clarity maybe what was going on here. But like, there's really great Instagram accounts. Again, TikTok has amazing, therapists and resources on there. There's a lot of great books that I can recommend. Wired for Love and Attached are just two of the ones that pop in my head right away. But this is one thing where it does take looking outside of yourself. I think like it takes somebody else holding us accountable, somebody else giving us those resources, because we just genuinely can't see it for ourselves a lot of the time.
Obviously, because it's all subconscious. So how can we know what we don't know
Yeah,
about ourselves, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So pretty much doing the subconscious work of discovering who you are and just being present in the
Hmm.
moment and just really getting more and more about awareness about yourself. That's like the way to go,
Hmm.
right?
Yep. Yeah. What's you and what were you taught about who you are? So,
Amazing. Thank you so much. This conversation was so beautiful. And if someone would like to maybe
yeah.
connect with you and know more or see your content, what's the best way to do this?
Probably through Instagram. My account is at Devon Caley, Caleyy. And then like through there, I have my, my blog and everything else linked too. But yeah, that's my personal account that I check way more. So I'll probably be way more responsive on that one.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much for everything that you shared. It
Thanks
was a
for
really interesting
having me. Yeah.
conversation for me as well, because I'm all into all these topics as well, emotions and attachment styles and personality and all these things. So I'm super, super grateful that you agreed to be with us. So thank you so, so
Yeah,
much.
likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so, so much for being with us, listening to us, and supporting us with your presence, with your beautiful presence. If you'd like to find me, I'm the Connection Catalyst on Instagram. I have some content there, some reels, some quotes, some cool stuff about, self help and psychotherapeutic stuff, emotional release, and you name it, spirituality as well, psychology. So if you're interested, follow me there. And I'm super grateful that you're here with us, and stay tuned to the next episode.